And the Brazilian team couldn't understand how the Italians were playing better.
I played in 3 World Cups, and that was the only game I ever lost. And I never got to play in a single World Cup final. 78, I didn't lose a game, same in 86. So that defeat in 82 was the only time I've lost a World Cup match. And even so, we never got to a final. That's football for you.
For Zico, it wasn't to be. He'd have to go through his entire career dubbed as a World Cup nearly man, his ability questioned as a result of never having captured football's biggest prize.
So Zico never won a World Cup? Well, that's the World Cup's bad luck. Did Michel Platini or Johan Cruyff ever win a World Cup? And are they any worse players because of that fact?
He was still #1 back in Rio. Flamengo were only too delighted to welcome him back. It wasn't the first or the last time that he'd sought refuge with his hometown club. And domestically, Flamengo showed no signs of letting up as they landed a 3rd title in 1983.
The club welcomed him with open arms, and he knew Flamengo was there for him. We saw Flamengo as being like his national team anyway, with the energy he gave us. So he was fine with his life. Everything he did with Flamengo cancels out that disappointment with Brazil. It was just one day.
Still, the doubts persisted, however. How could someone who'd won so much at domestic level still be considered a World Cup failure?
He enjoyed a lot more success over the years with Flamengo than with Brazil.
Against Zico's wishes, Flamengo decided to cash in and sell their star asset. The player was adamant that he never had any intention of leaving, but his hand was forced. The unthinkable had occurred. Zico would leave Flamengo, and the time had come to try his luck in Europe.
I think before all this happened, I would have liked to have stayed at Flamengo. And I did everything possible for that to happen.
Little-known Italian club Udinese had won the race to sign the world's best player. An Italian journalist likened the signing to installing the engine of a Ferrari in a Volkswagen. But why had he chosen to move to such a small club?
Because it was Udinese who came to Flamengo and bought me. The others didn't. So there's only an issue of choosing a side when you've got offers on the table.
He went to play for Udinese, and I'll tell you this, a side so small the population of Udine could fit inside the Maracanã.
Udinese's new hero wasted little time in settling in. In 1984, he was the 2nd top scorer in Serie A with 19 goals, but his Italian adventure soon began to go wrong.
I managed to live up to what was expected of me. The only thing was I had one problem. Udinese had a young team, and we played really well in my first year there. But I got injured towards the end of the season, and we just missed out on the UEFA Cup spot. In the 2nd year, the club president fell out with the manager, and so everything came off the rails.
Flamengo, now with a new board, were keen to offer their former star a lifeline. Zico wasted little time in rekindling his love affair with the club.
We knew that he'd left a seed here, and we're almost sure that he'd go over there and play, but that he'd be back one day. And that's what happened. He went, and then he came back.
Again, there were critics suggesting he lacked the mental fortitude to succeed in Europe. In reality, Zico wanted to in his beloved Rio.
I wish every Brazilian player took the same stance as Zico. I want to see them all playing here and not in Europe. He was the king of Rio, hero at the club with the biggest fan base in the country. Why would he want to leave Brazil?
A return to Brazil also meant a return to the national team. Now in his early 30s, Zico's star showed no sign of fading, despite now being plagued by injury problems. A stunning hat-trick against Yugoslavia in 1986 proved he was ready for one last crack at World Cup glory in Mexico. Brazil had the same players as in '82, but they weren't the same force. Their ageing stars were no longer expected to set the world alight.
In '86, things were different. Firstly, we didn't have the same preparation. Secondly, the supposedly great players in the team were all a bit past it. Me, Falcao, Zico, we were all getting on and injury prone. Our age was beginning to tell.
Brazil began brightly and ensured themselves of a quarter-final tie against the European champions France. But Zico was struggling to overcome a knee injury and found himself in an unfamiliar position on the bench.
If I hadn't been the pro that I was, I probably wouldn't have even been playing in that World Cup. I simply wasn't fit enough. And I asked for them not to include me in the squad, but I was told by the Brazilian FA to sacrifice myself and battle against a knee injury that I had at the time.
Allez Dominique, il faut centrer Dominique, oh là là,
With the match locked at 1-1, Zico was once again introduced as the potential saviour, and he was greeted to a standing ovation. His impact was immediate. He set up Branco. The decision was a penalty, but who would take it?
You know, some people say that I should have taken it, but I wasn't going to take it. I'd only taken the one in our previous game because Zico wasn't playing.
Sometimes in a player's career, there's a defining moment for which he is forever remembered. This was Zico's, a chance to make amends for that defeat in 1982. It was a chance spurned, and one that still hasn't been forgotten.
I still get criticised even today, because in Brazil it seems that every World Cup where we don't win, there has to be a scapegoat. In 1950 it was Barbosa, in 82 to Nino Cerezo, in 78 it was Coutinho, and so in 86 it was me. Every time we don't win, people want to find someone to blame.
Brazil went on to lose in a penalty shootout. Socrates, one of two players to miss, as France sealed a famous win. Not that anyone remembers his miss.
Even today, most people remember the penalty that Zico missed. And no one remembers that I missed one. I've got no idea why that is, but he was the one who got all the blame.
Once again, the reaction from Flamengo was completely different. Another World Cup failure, but yet another warm welcome home in Rio. While his career was coming to an end, Zico found a new lease of life in nurturing a very talented young side.
The spirit is good. The squad's very young, but very talented. I look to give the youngsters here all of my experience that they'll need. It was a great team. We had 5 players who would go on to become world champions in '94. We had Jorginho, Aldair, Zinho, Bebeto and Leonardo.
We had some great players, with a true legend, Zico, at the forefront. He had a very important role in the side, and it was important for the rest of us to give something back to the Rooster in his last years.
Flamengo's number 10 inspired his teammates to title number 4 in 1987. Of all his many achievements, perhaps this one was his greatest.
Careers. Myself, Ailton, Zinho and Zé Carlos. It was a great experience to have played alongside Zico.
But the Rooster was beginning to feel his age. His body couldn't cope, and the enthusiasm was no longer there. In 1989, at the age of 36, he felt he had no option but to retire.
I'd play 3 or 4 games and then pick up a muscular injury. And so this started to really get me down. And I lost all enjoyment in training, and when you lose the enjoyment, you can't go on.
The curtain had come down on a career that had witnessed 52 goals for Brazil and more than 500 for Flamengo. Despite a final fling in Japanese football and forays into management, it's at Flamengo that his memory will be most cherished. Zico himself considers the moment he first arrived there as the defining moment of a glittering 20 years at the top.
That was the most memorable day, as that's where it all began. My history in football started when I first trained with Flamengo. That's the moment for me. My story started there.